Welcome to the Hit Like a Girl podcast. This is High Tea with Grace, where we spill the tea on HIT. I'm excited to extend a warm welcome to Angela Radcliffe. She is infamous and fabulous in the research world, and I can't wait for you to meet her today. Thanks for joining us, Angela.
Wow, thanks for having me. Infamous is probably the right description. Better than famous, I think, right?
You are one of a kind, absolutely. So tell us about the career path that brought you to your role today.
Yeah, sure. I love telling this story. I don't get to tell it as often anymore because I've moved into the early discovery part of the research and development world. And that's where, all of the scientists are doing the hard work of sifting through all these molecules, right, to find that next new treatment or cure, which has been fascinating for me. But I started my career early on, sort of with a marketing and writing bend and continuing medical education. I was a grant writer for continuing medical education. And, through a series of sort of twists and turns, ended up over in the payer landscape at United Healthcare for a bit. And then in 2001, one of my younger siblings, I'm the oldest of six, got out of a pool one day over in Korea. He was serving in the Army as a chaplain on the demarcation line, and he died, no sign or symptom. And I can talk about this, very formally now, because that was in 2001. It happened a month before 9/11, so it's seared into my memory, like that year is for many people. And what he was 21, healthiest of all of us, truly. And what we came to find out was he had died of something called long QT syndrome. It's an electrical imbalance in the rhythm in our heart. We were all sort of tuned in to the football game and Damar Hamlin this past couple weeks, and I think people are starting to realize like how amazing the heart is, and that it can get hit wrong or things can happen, and your electrical rhythm changes.
Wow.
So my brother had just literally collapsed and died instantly from this disease. And we didn't even know what it was. But through some amazing connections, and some family history sort of sleuthing, we got connected to a clinical research study on long QT disorder. And our whole family joined, and they found the specific gene in our family, and that allowed us to treat that gene either with beta blockers or implanted defibrillators, and also increase the awareness across our family of this disease. So I have girl cousins who had heart attacks in childbirth and couldn't explain it. I have had a cousin collapse on his office floor and be brought back to life. So the legacy of my brother had an impact on all of us. But for me, I said, wow, I had no idea clinical research could do this, could make this kind of magic.
I have goosebumps. Wow.
So I did a crazy thing, which, maybe this is why I'm a little infamous, but I started picking up the phone and calling patient recruitment companies until I found one and got an interview. And I was initially turned down for the job because I don't have a college degree. And that's a fun fact very few people know about me, because I've spent so much time in the space. People just assume if you're in healthcare, you must have a science background. But someone took a chance on me, and that's how I initially got into patient recruitment and engagement. And my career since then has been primarily focused on patient engagement and has taken some twists and turns. I've done a lot in digital health. I've done a lot with data governance in particular. And here I am now in research and early discovery at BMS.
Wow. BristolMeyers Squibbs, right? That's
right.
Wow. Right. BMS. That's amazing. So, this exciting, amazing kind of story. It's sad. It's so much power that comes from heartbreak. It's incredible, and passion, and it's amazing what you bring into this world. And I just want to thank you so much for sharing that story with us and giving us insight into your true journey, not just career, but also personal, that really led you into what you are today. It's truly, truly impactful.
Well, thanks for saying that. I think all of us who work in healthcare, no matter where you are in the ecosystem, almost to the person, if you ask them to tell you why they're in healthcare, they've got a personal story to share. And that's something we don't do enough, right? We don't ask people, just stop and say, hey, how'd you get where you are? What are you doing? So thank you and the podcast for bringing light to those stories. I think it's really important.
Absolutely. So I want to dive into some of this research work that you're working on, and kind of talk a little bit about the patient centricity movement now. So how is this patient centricity movement and diversity movement really impacting the research world? What concepts and solutions really anchor these efforts? What limitations keep the movement from gaining even more momentum? Because clearly the patient story is impactful and it should be patient-centric. So yeah, what are the pros and cons?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. It's really hard when you have been trying to impact something for a lot of years to go like, have we really made any progress? And patient engagement is one of those spaces. I think the people who have fought the good fight to try and make clinical trials more inclusive and diverse, they are also feeling fatigued. And yet a lot of us are re-energized at the same time right now. And there's a couple of reasons for that. For a long time, patient centricity, patient engagement, these were buzzwords. We said we did them. We'd be lucky to get a token patient on a panel at a conference. That's one of those places that I still think we have a lot of work to do. I think we have a lot of work to do. I'll just say that. I think we still have so much work to do. But I think that there are a couple of things that have sort of converged to help us see that if we don't start paying attention to lived experience, we're really missing the message. So for a while, it was, patients are patients. We're the drug developers. We're following the science. It's over here in a lab. It's not right there, with people and humans. And I think what we've realized is, no, it's absolutely starts with the humans. And we cannot tolerate, if we want a healthier world, to continue to make research about perfect patients. And I hate to say that, right? Because it sounds so derogatory, but heck, we use the term subject for a long time, and that's really derogatory. A few folks that I know in the inclusion space talk about this concept that we use words still that are really inflammatory. So we complain about subject. Well, think about the use of the word trial when you're trying to recruit people from marginalized communities who have been, also marginalized in our legal system, for example. So even our vernacular has had an evolution over time. And that's just a start, though. So what we've realized is, when you do research on perfect patients, you can have that perfect controlled clinical trial, and you can usually meet your primary outcome. But how much does that matter if then the drug that you put on market only serves those perfect patients? Like, how limiting is that, right? How limiting is that? And now we're in a place where the science has outpaced us, in that, what years ago when we talked about things like cell therapy and precision medicine, these things, they seem like, scientific, futuristic, crazy things. And now it's not uncommon for a cancer patient to have their own cells taken out of their body and then put back into their body to be part of the treatment. So that's true precision medicine right there, right? That is your very own body. And if you look at what's happened, right, with the mRNA push since COVID, we're talking about science that is not waiting around for us to get our act together in figuring out how to do research that creates outcomes for not just your perfect patient. So I think that's, that's hopeful. I think the other thing that's like really exciting is the sort of confluence of patient engagement and the push towards true patient centricity and the push towards having more diverse and inclusive clinical trials. We're seeing those come together in a way we never did before, and they share one thing, and that is this concept of lived experience. And that's a term like I didn't even really know until I started on my own, journey to really better understand how I could be a better human, and how I could be a more inclusive human myself. And this concept of lived experience, we all have it, right? We all have it, but very few people understand how important it is to apply to everything around us in order to make an impact. And so this idea of taking patient advocates who used to sit in this special little box of, I'm a patient advocate and that's what I do for a living, and people who are diversity and inclusion experts, and that's what I have to do for a living. And now realizing, no, this is humans and we all have lived experience. And the more we can amplify one another's lived experience, the more opportunity we have to create better healthcare for everyone. So I said a mouthful. You've got me on my soapbox already. I'm rambling.
I love it. No, that is truly fantastic and insightful. Moving more into that, what is clinical research as a care option? Now we know research can be done outside the walls of an academic institution. It's coming into your pocket. It's coming onto your watch. Research is coming to the patient. Where is it gaining the most momentum, and why is it being challenged?
Yeah, that's another great question. So I would say I was an early advocate of the CRACO movement, right? Clinical research as a care option. We've never found a better word for it because it's best to just say what it is. And that is this concept of clinical research shouldn't just be this thing that's kept over here. Again, back to that sort of perfect patient concept, white males 18 to 65 or what have you, right? It is, it's this concept that it's not acceptable to just do research in academic medical centers or research specific sites and facilities, because that's not meeting people where they are. And it pairs that with the exciting concept that clinical research is one of many options that we could be considering as we look to manage our own health. And there's been some detractors of CRACO recently. I've seen some rabble rousing on LinkedIn about this, that, clinical research shouldn't be considered a care option. It is not fair to consider something that is unproven a care option. And for people who say that, I say there are a lot of things that we do that are not proven for any one person. Mm-hmm. Some of us can take Advil, and that cures a headache. Other people have to take Excedrin. For other people, they drink a glass of water. So even things that have been proven for one person might not be what someone else needs. And quite frankly, we haven't figured it all out. And discovering what works for different types of people is part and parcel to our healthcare journey. So I know there's a lot of excitement around things like Fitbits, and I was pointing to my Oura Ring earlier. I can't live without it. I'd love to know my readiness, and hopefully today was good, right? But we get excited about wearables and devices, and I love a good piece of health tech, like the Next Girl. But why is it that it's okay for us to learn about our own metrics, how many steps we took, how well we slept, and not for us to know that maybe that current treatment option, whether it's over the counter or it's by prescription, or that lifestyle option, getting more sleep, eating differently, why are we being excluded from this other option, which is, would you like to explore if this new thing could actually be the thing for you?
Wow.
And of course there are risks, right? There are risks and benefits. That's what institutional review boards are there for. They're there to make sure that we are not repeating the mistakes of the past in clinical research, and we are being ethical in the way that we handle all patients, telling them, hey, this may or may not work. But if we didn't have people participate in research, then we wouldn't have any of those other things that we're talking about. And people really forget that. So what excites me about the clinical research as a care option movement, and where I think it's going, is, to me, is the formal home for the consumerization of healthcare. If you listen to prognosticators and futurists in the healthcare space, they talk a lot about the consumerization of healthcare. And some people hate that term because they hate the concept that it makes us feel like commodities. But really, it's not that the people are the commodities, it's that healthcare is a commodity like everything else we buy. And we should have an opportunity to shop for the red shoes or the blue shoes in size 9 or size 2. And I would love to see our clinical research embedded in all of our other healthcare. I'm lucky that I have a primary care physician who is part of an academic medical center. And when I go see her, she brings students in the room with her often. That's always a little bit of fun. But one of the things she does do is she tells me about research opportunities as she's also telling me how we need to adjust my meds. What are the things I might be wanting to do for myself? That's where I need to have it presented to me from a trusted source. And so the clinical research as the care option movement, to me, it's fully ingrained. COVID has made it happen even more because we've realized that clinical research has to happen not just in specific sites, but as a decentralized, hybrid, et cetera, model where patient choice is first. And I hope it continues because I think that's what we need as patients. We need all of our choices presented to us.
Absolutely. And if you ask anyone who's in the rare disease community, rare disease patient, caregiver, care partner, they say Craco is what's giving them hope. They want Craco. And it's really part of that diversity and inclusion as well into the research world, really pushing it out there and getting it into where patients are. So it's truly, truly interesting and fantastic. I'd love now to ask you a little bit about ChatGPT. So we're hearing about healthcare use cases for ChatGPT, visual AI generators. What effects could these innovations have on research?
Yeah, so, 3 years ago, I think if you had told us that things like the AI generator Vanna could make us look like ourselves, but also an elf or a cyborg by just taking a few images, or that things like ChatGPT would exist where it's not just a simple chatbot. You can ask complex questions, and if the model has been trained, and you can even take part as any person in training this model to get smarter and ask more interesting questions and give you more interesting answers. I don't think we would have believed it. And I think we've had this pardon my French, but oh shit moment with AI all of a sudden where we've realized oh, it's really here. It isn't just this futuristic thing. And in the healthcare space, it's been so interesting to watch the media and the posts sort of fly around because we still have people who are very well respected in our industry saying things like synthetic cohorts for clinical research or synthetic data. That's kind of hype. It's not hope at this point. But then you look at something like ChatGPT, who, apparently now we can use to pass the medical bar, medical exams, right? That's sort of mind blowing to people that they realize you can ask questions and that this intelligence that we created and we are training and feeding can do some pretty amazing things. So I think all of a sudden people's minds are open that the possibilities, and they're here now. It's not so futuristic. And yet, I think some of the reason people are kind of both poking fun at ChatGPT and also posting use cases at the same time is, I think this is one of those things where I feel like, I don't know about you, but I often have this sort of pit in my stomach sort of instinct when I know something is really cool, but maybe I don't quite understand it. And ChatGPT, Vanna, all of these, AI tools, they give me a little bit of that pit in my stomach.
I know. I wonder, it's is there an ethical line when they're using it and with real patients and patients don't know? So I wonder if there is going to be at some point, a sign off. Yes, I know I'll use it or not. Maybe there will be a clinical trial or something that goes into it. It's interesting.
It is really fascinating. I have a mentor who I've worked with in the patient data ownership movement for many years. And he invited me a couple of years ago to the UN sort of anniversary of the Declaration of their human rights. And at the time, we were talking about this concept of making patient data ownership sort of the 31st human right. And it got some momentum, although I feel like the idea was still a little early for the world. But what I heard at that conference was, you have the people like the founder of the internet sitting there, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, and they were saying things like, I did create this amazing thing, but I had no idea the unintended consequences of that thing. And as a patient and as a parent and as a human, I'm confronted so many times in the day with these quandaries of these things that have been given to us, whether it's social media, whether it is another app on our phone that collects our health data, or whether it's some of this new AI technology that has some really interesting, sometimes scary trade-offs when we want to use them. And so, of course, I hopped right on the bandwagon and started typing stuff into ChatGPT. Of course, I had debates about it, but initially, even though some in my cyber vigilant community have said, don't ever let your kids download TikTok, I let that happen. And most of us click that sort of I accept button over and over and over again, right? We don't even think twice about it. So to your point, the ethics of all of this and trying to the best of our ability to forecast some of the unintended consequences that could come up. I get a little tired of us talking about the only example we talk about when we talk about bias in AI in healthcare. It's not the only example, but it's as usual, I'm infamously exaggerating. But what we talk about is how poor image AI does for people of color. And that's true, right? Or our pulse oximeters and how poor they do, right? And how we're not being inclusive in that way. All of that is 100% true, but there are hundreds of other use cases too that we need to really think about the ethics of, and we need to think about the unintended consequences of. And so for me, I feel like my personal responsibility, being someone who leads in the data space, I need to be constantly reminding us as a community to check our own biases and to remember we're introducing all of those biases to this amazing technology. It can be a friend or foe, but we truly, truly have to know what we're getting ourselves into. And look, fear is what stops people from innovating all the time. And I don't want to ever let fear drive my decisions. But I think there is a difference between fear and being truly risk averse and being vigilant and being smart and making sure you're keeping your aperture open to what you're actually dealing with.
That's so true. So true. Now, I'm wondering, in that kind of tone, what healthcare technologies and research innovations and things out there are most exciting you now?
Yeah, I feel like we're finally moving past a point where when we talk about medical devices that are part of research, it's not just about remote patient monitoring anymore. I mean, I love the concept of remote patient monitoring because it allows us to know that that we are being cared for by our clinician throughout the course of a clinical trial, that they might be able to see and predict a side effect even, and keep us safe and keep us healthy. But we are now beyond just remote patient monitoring. I've sat in a couple pitch competitions over the last year where we're seeing things like ports that now are smart ports that can predict an infection is brewing so a patient can stay healthy. That's beyond remote patient monitoring. That is truly, infection prevention happening. That sort of blows my mind. I also think we are starting to harness technologies, big and small. One of my favorite stories, and this goes all the way back to 2017, as I saw this father get up on stage at the Stanford Medicine X conference, and he was there with his daughter who had a rare disease, and it caused her to lose the use of her arm. And he, being an engineer, figured out how to create plans for a special brace that she was able to use to regain use of that arm, and he 3D printed it and he open sourced that out onto the free market, so to speak, so other parents could do it. And so this concept of us moving sort of to beyond just hey, I'm keeping track of you and how you're doing, to things that actually are true interventions, that amazes me. And this, of course, this trend, which I think we should stop calling a trend, and I wish we could come up with a better term for it, decentralized trials, hybrid trials, emerging trial delivery models is what I used to call it, right? But let's face it, what we're really talking about here, it goes right back to CRICO, which is what does clinical research as a care option look like to you? Do you want to come into a site? Do you want people to come into your home? Do you want people never to come into your home? If you see how messy this room is behind me. I would not like to do a study visit at home. Thank you very much. But I love this concept of the fact that everybody in the healthcare game is starting to get into it and play. I love seeing the Walgreens and the CVSs come in and do their thing and say, we are in these communities already. Walmart, was one of the very few places that we had around us when I was a kid. I grew up sort of truly outhouse poor in Texas, and Walmart was one of the places that you sort of was almost like town square. And Walmart's done a lot to support veterans healthcare because they're in those rural communities. So now that we've got new places to be taking care of our own health, and research is starting to come along and be part of those new places, or the way we're leveraging those places in a new way, that's what I'm excited about. I'm excited about the way that all of a sudden we're starting to work together as a collective ecosystem to make things better for patients, whether it's technologists and device manufacturers, whether it's trialists who are willing to try something new, or whether it's companies who are risking, in some cases, their Wall Street profits on being there and present on a new business model, which includes research, which makes it research for all. Yay.
I just love that. It's so true. And I just love to hear your insight as, a woman who has held coveted roles in research, and, you're well known and respected in your area of influence, regularly on these panels, regularly hearing these important conversations happening. So really appreciate that insight. What skills and daily habits, I kind of want to move to talking to you now, just you as a professional, as a woman, as a mentor, what skills and habits have you, done to kind of get to where you are now in your career?
That's a really great question. I'm finally old enough to have enough hindsight to maybe pick a couple things out there. One of them is it's a product of my lack of college degree, which is I've never been settled in specializing in one area. It's been really important for me, and I think it's really important for young people to explore lots of different things. There's a difference between building a skill set and building subject matter expertise. And so I came into the research space with no subject matter expertise in research. I have it now because I've spent 20 years in this space. But what I did come in with was a great writing skill set. And I took that great writing skill set and I made that a great speaking skill set. And I took that great communication skill set and I made that a great creative skill set. And then I picked up ideation techniques and I learned things like design thinking and root cause problem solving. So I brought a problem solving thing and I started to stack these skills sort of one on top of the other. And those skills are transferable and applicable to lots of different things. So yes, I've elected to pair that skill stack with subject matter expertise in research because I care about it. I'm deeply passionate about it. And I think that's what we need to think about doing, right? So for me, the key to success has been ultimate flexibility and being willing to just constantly stay curious and try new things and not get hung up on what I don't know. I think we all have those moments where we want to be the smartest person in the room. I now sit on a team with a lot of really smart people in the room. I mean, we're talking scientists, engineers, people who have 8, 10, 12 years of education, and then another 20 years of, work experience on top of that, doing really amazing, complicated things. I'm never going to be the smartest person in those rooms, right? And that's okay, because what I can do and what I can contribute is I can bring my enthusiasm, my curiosity, my passion, and then I can help them pull that out. And so for me, it's about sort of finding your place, not being worried about being that either the smartest person or I'd rather be the nicest person than the smartest person. I'd rather be the most curious person than the smartest person. But I think really finding what you're passionate about, it all comes back to that. And then whatever skills you can stack on top of that passion, you'll be unstoppable.
Absolutely. I met you because at a conference, you invited me into your crew and just enveloped me into this crew and supported me and in love. And I was a total stranger, but you let me in. And I just remember thinking, wow, that Angela, she is a powerhouse. Why is mentorship so important to you?
Mm-hmm. If I didn't have amazing mentors throughout my career, I wouldn't have a career. People over and over and over again took chances on me. Somebody early in my career said, I know that you were working at Bell Atlantic, what we now call Verizon, as an executive assistant, that you temped into that job, but you're a great writer. I think you can be a proposal and grant writer. And I was like, what? But that person spent the time on me. I have had bosses over the years who mentored me in really important ways that have made me a good boss and mentor. Things like giving me advice like, look, everybody's got good and bad things about them. Your job, and my job as your boss is to love all those amazing things you bring to the table. I can ignore the rest about you. And, or bosses who taught me that sometimes even rock stars on your team need to move to a different team. You need to sort of export that talent somewhere else because it's maybe holding back the team in certain ways. So people have taken a lot of chances on me. And I think that's one piece of it. I think the other piece of it, and this is a really personal piece, I think, is, I mentioned earlier that, we grew up very, very poor. So we were often the family, that got the toys for tots. We got the basket of fruit from church. People sort of did things and took care of our family. But while they were doing that, I had a great example of parents who brought strangers into our house because they didn't have anything either, or, lifted people up regularly. And I think that human connection, the vulnerability, we show it in our inner circles, our personal circles with our friends and our family, the people who know and love us. And we forget that if we project that out in our work circle, we take work from work to vocation. It goes from something that we just do every day, sometimes from a place of passion, sometimes because that's just what our job is. But it changes it from being something that we have to do to something we want to do, and something that we want to do that really increases our impact on the people around us. And so I think it's just important to show up with vulnerability and empathy and be willing to put yourself out there, because if you're willing to do that, you discover some of the most amazing things about people. I mean, I met you because you were willing to be vulnerable yourself, right? And come be part of our Pay It Forward dinner and just spend the time and say, how can I help you? How can you help me? And that was at a personal level. It wasn't for any other reason. We got to know each other and what sort of made each of us special. And that was because we were vulnerable and shared. So it's a little scary to do that, but I think we have to do that more in the workplace, especially in the day and age that we're living in now.
Absolutely. It's such a beautiful example. I know you talk a lot about impact influencing. What is that? And how can we make this more accessible to all?
Thanks for asking that. It is a term that I coined that has not quite caught on yet.
It will.
I'm on the Hit Like a Girl podcast. So all of you amazing listeners and viewers. So impact influencing, for many years, there was this sort of, and it, still exists, right? It's the impact investing concept, where we, you put your money where your heart is. It's about like, where can you invest your financial resources and your other resources to have an impact in this world, to do good, to do the right things. And the thing that I love about that, of course, is it's taking your resources and putting them in the right places and making choices to maybe do that versus sort of live in profit. But I don't think, unfortunately, impact investing is accessible to everyone, because lots of people don't have any extra resources, especially in the day and time of inflation that we live in, right? Some people are making the choice, a lot of people, maybe most people are making choices like, my car broke down, do I fix it or do I ride the bus because I've got to pay the electric bill? Or, gee, I'd love to, pay for my medicine, right? But I've got to feed my kids. So this idea to me is, it's not very accessible, but we all have a sphere of influence. And so to me, if you want to have impact, then what can you give? What can you offer out to the world to make a change? And for that, I think everyone has a sphere of influence, no matter where you are in the world. Your influence might be in a small pocket or a big pocket. So we've talked about, obviously, my passion about clinical research participation. And one of the things that I know I can do to level up my influence and my impact on the world is participate in research. And I don't do that just because I think if I participate in research, that I'm going to have an impact on research. Of course, I believe that. But I also believe deeply that research has the opportunity to impact every social cause we care about, whether it is making health more accessible to all, or whether it is ending some things that are really awful in our world, like housing insecurity. Housing insecurity is the one I go to the most because I was always 2 steps from homeless as a kid. And I think that really carried through for me as sort of this fear that sort of lives in here all the time, that I know you can sort of have nothing very quickly, including a place to live, which is a scary place as a parent to even think about. But I know that if I participate in research on mental health or substance abuse topics, and that could be answering a research survey, by the way. I may or may not have a mental health condition. I do. I'm proudly a well-managed bipolar disorder person with well-managed bipolar disorder. But if I didn't, I could still do things to impact substance abuse or mental health trials. And by participating in those things, I'm having a ripple effect on homelessness and housing insecurity, because many people who end up in that situation are there because of a substance abuse issue or a mental health issue or a combination of both. And so if I think about what actions can I take that could take my influence in my tiny sphere of the world, which is participating in this one little research study, and I think about the impact, that ripple effect it could have, I realize, wow, that little action might stop someone from becoming homeless. That keeps me going, right? And I think we all have things like that we can do, things that we care about, that we do every single day, that if we just did this tiny little tweak and we thought about it a little bit differently, we could increase our sphere of impact on the things that we really care about.
Oh, that is so inspiring and encouraging. And truly, anyone could be an impact influencer in their sphere of influence. And so that's exciting to think about how our listeners can be that impact influencer. What do you guys want to do to impact the world around you? Let us know in the comments. To finish this conversation off right, where can our listeners find you online?
So I do a lot of sort of side things, and to find out about that, and by side things, I mean, I do a lot of coaching and mentoring and training. I run retreats sometimes with other friends inside and outside of industry to try and bring other people forward. And I'm really passionate about helping people apply business skills like design thinking to their real world. Like, I helped figure out how to make my daughter's summers a little less yucky by using design thinking to sort of work my way through the challenge we were having. So I can be found on www.howmightywe, so like how might we, but with a Y, howmightywe.com. And of course, I'm very findable on LinkedIn. I'd love to follow you and have you follow me. That's an open invitation to all, because I think that for me, it right now is the social media platform I pay the most attention to. Those are two great ways to sort of see what I'm up to, either sort of on the personal impact influencer front, howmightywe.com, or on the professional front, LinkedIn, where I publish a lot of thought leadership.
That's terrific. So before I forget, did you happen to bring tea with you today?
I always have tea with me.
Oh, I love it. Tell me about your mug.
All right. So this is one of my favorites. I know it's a little irreverent.
What does it say for our listeners?
It says, "Welcome to the shit show." And it's a beautiful mug. For those of you just listening, it's a beautiful cream colored mug. I like a big mug that you can hold with 2 hands, and bright gold lettering. That's what it says. And it was gifted to me by a dear friend, Trisha Barrett. She is an impact influencer in her own right, especially in the patient engagement space creatively. And she brought it to a girls' weekend that we had with a circle of other women in our space, which again, I think is so important, that connection. And it was a gift. And what I love about it is it embraces the spirit of irreverence that I think I try to bring into every day, which is, man, I mean, some days, a lot of days, maybe every day does sometimes feel like a shit show, but it doesn't have to feel yucky. We can come into it with positivity. And so for me, it's like, instead of thinking of it as welcome to the shit show, for me, it's welcome to the shit show. Like, I'm ready to jump in.
You have control of this circus, right?
I have control of this circus, right? Exactly. I have control of this circus. And in so many ways, like, that's where the fun stuff is found. That's where the good stuff is found. So it's one of my favorites, especially on days where I need to like own that day instead of letting the day own me. Grab my welcome to the shit show mug and pour a big hot cup of British Twinings Earl Grey tea, the only tea by my, opinion, in there, and I'm good to go for the day.
That's too good. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Angela.
Thanks so much for having me. This was so much fun. It was great to see you, and I hope we get to see each other in person again really soon.
Hopefully so. And thank you all for joining us too. Check out the Hit Like a Girl podcast website and YouTube page for more great guests like Angela today. Cheers.
Cheers.